talk to me real quick about, you always hear the peripherals of the debate about expanding Illinois' sales tax, not so much increasing the rate, but taxing a lot. Ralph Martiri says it's modernizing the economy. Critics say it's just adding more taxes. How did we get to where we are in Illinois, where so many of these things just, do they fall through the cracks? How, why is it that our tax code is the way that it is?
Well, I think this is a pretty standard part of the debate about how it's best to fund government and who pays, because no one wants to pay more taxes, so we have that constant tension about what is the best way to fund government. I believe that the sales tax debate, I think that because the economy is a more service-based economy now, that's something that we ought to be looking at. But again, I'm one voice in the debate, and obviously, other voices have weighed in more heavily than mine.
Let me ask this to get out of the way politically right now. Mm-hmm. What chance would any kind of another tax increase stand in this general? So we just passed an income tax increase.
I think that another tax discussion has almost zero likelihood of happening. That being said, the only scenario under which I can see that is if we were to roll back part of the income tax increase and move to a broader sales tax base.
This is where Illinois' economy. I mean, 70% of the national economy is consumer driven. Mm-hmm. People are buying more and making less. Is this, as we roll out, is this going to have to be part of the discussion? And do you see it as give and take, or will it be, all right, we're going to replace the income tax increase with the sales tax expansion, or are all of these things sort of moving around each other?
I think that a lot of these tax discussions move around each other, and it's a question of kind of who supports what and what voices are championing a particular type of tax structure. But I think at some point we are going to have a more serious debate about this, because the economy is becoming more and more service-based and not less and less. That's a very clear trend. And if we are going to keep up with funding government services without having to continually come back and say, wow, and have legislators vote for yet another tax increase, we have to find a tax system that will grow at the rate of the economy.
COG was saying between $4 and $8 billion if you were to expand the tax base. Was it $7 billion from the income tax increase?
I believe it was $6.7 billion. So yes, it was about that number. And again, I think that we don't ever want to fund government and be so reliant on one type of tax that when that tax takes a big hit, that we can't find a way to fund government. So I think, again, not going forward, in the future, at some point in the future, this debate will happen again.
Why didn't it happen this time? The focus was so much on, was it coming off the election and that the income tax had been aired before the voters, or was it an oversight? I don't want to say somebody was lazy or forgot, but it just seemed everybody looked right at the income tax, and there was no discussion about anything else.
Well, there were voices calling for it, but they were obviously drowned out by the income tax increase. I think that the sense was that that when you start broadening the sales tax base, you bring on a lot of opponents, and would be a lot of gnashing of teeth in Springfield. And raising taxes, raising revenue is hard enough, and let's try to keep it as simple as possible.
The tax hike that was just passed is temporary. 4 years from now, a General Assembly, the 98th? Want to be the 98th?
Yeah, I don't know. Your math is probably better than mine.
Trust me, my math is better than no one's.
Okay.
4 years from now, a General Assembly is going to have to vote to make this permanent or
let it expire.
Is that the time, not to say get into the crystal ball too much, but is that probably the next opportunity?
I would say I would say that when the income tax is due to roll back is the next opportunity. Whether we have experienced enough growth in revenues at that time to be able to fund the services that the state of Illinois, that the citizens of Illinois want, will determine whether or not we actually have that debate. Because if the economy is humming along and revenues are increasing and we're doing just fine, we're not going to have that debate. But if things are still struggling, I could anticipate that would be another time for discussion.
The last question, and this is, we talked to Mike Tryon. He said Illinois doesn't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And anytime you talk about taxing anything or increasing taxes, that's the common refrain from the GOP side. Is it that simple that if Illinois were to simply stop spending as much money that the taxes would work themselves out and government would?
I can only tell you that last spring, a group of 10 Democrats proposed $1.3 billion in cuts, and we could not get almost no, I wouldn't want to say none, but we could get almost no Republican support for those cuts because they're difficult things to cut. Education, higher education, human services. And so those are the kinds of things that no one wants to. We're going to have to, but no one wants to cut. So I think for the GOP to say we're willing to cut $7 to $8 billion out of a $27 billion discretionary budget, but not support $1.3 billion in cuts is a little bit disingenuous.